Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping you feel better about your finances. I'm your host, Jim Grace, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the psychology of money and explore the emotional aspects that shape our financial decisions and how we feel about them. A quick note before we start, although I do hope that you find the information on this show to be helpful, in no way are any of these discussions to be taken as specific financial advice. Please do your own research and talk to your own advisors, especially when making important financial decisions. All right, everybody, welcome to Modern Financial Wellness. I'm joined by two guests today. Jen Reid, who you guys know if you've been listening to the show. This is Jen Reid's second appearance on Modern Financial Wellness. Welcome back, Jen.
Hello.
I think you're the first second time appearance guest on the show. So that's a huge accomplishment. I'm sure you're very proud.
I'm very honored.
Well, welcome back. And we're joined by Julie Costa. Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness. Julie, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
I'm looking forward to talking to both of you guys. Jen, since you've been here before, if people haven't checked out that episode, I'd encourage people to go back and listen to Jen's episode. We unpacked your story a little bit, how you arrived at the place you're at right now. But for those who don't know you, do you just want to tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Quickly, I was in the financial planning world, loved it a lot, but wanted to have more engagement, more touches with clients just because I knew the emotional piece was so important when it came to money and finances. So I left and started my own financial firm, which is more focused on the financial coaching, helping people with budgeting, doing things that they know what to do, but they're not doing what they know. And it kind of just creates that empowerment and that confidence when it comes to financial planning and taking the next step in their financial planning journey, which has been so fun and lets me work with a lot of people who are just getting started in their financial planning journey too.
That's great. Awesome. Well, again, it's good to see you again. Thanks so much for taking the time. And Julie, I guess same question. Since this is the first time we're meeting you, would you tell us a little bit about your background and how you describe the work that you do today?
Yeah, I always like to kick it off and say I got fired from a 10-year corporate career that I loved and am now a certified master clinical hypnotherapist. And if you would have told me 10 years ago, this is what I would be doing, I would think you are crazy. Something that was like the biggest ego blow to happen to me at the time with getting fired turned into be like the biggest blessing in disguise and put me really on this path, entrepreneurship and more so personal development, but like a lot deeper than personal development, like doing the inner work. And so I work a lot with clients to unpack the things that are kind of sabotaging them from achieving their goals, whether it's that procrastination, perfectionism. We were just chatting earlier, like overspending, whatever it is, like those are the things I support my clients with so they can easily achieve their goals.
And typically, who are your clients? Who do you typically work with?
Majority of my clients are business owners, coaches, service-based entrepreneurs. That's who I typically speak to in my marketing. And I'll always get some like random one-offs with like nail biting or like, a certain fear that somebody wants to overcome. But I really love the intersection of business and hypnotherapy.
Okay. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think there's a lot of overlap with the work that you do into personal finance. And I know that Jen 100%. Shares a lot of the similar beliefs. So hopefully as you help us understand a little bit more the work that you do, Jen can help interpret how these things apply in the world of personal finance and financial coaching and money mindset. That's what we're going to try to understand a little bit here today. So again, I'm very excited to have you both. And I think this conversation is really particularly useful for folks because we always hear, especially online, there's a lot of content around changing your limiting beliefs or changing your mindset, but I don't see a lot of practical tools or tips or frameworks on how to actually implement that. Right. So Correct. Hopefully we can, get some of those takeaways and some of those tools and actually show people what this looks like in practice before we let you go. So again, excited to talk to you both. Julie, maybe you could start by maybe some of the science or the background. You talk about rewiring your mind. What's going on in our minds scientifically, and why might we need to rewire our brains?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the majority of us have been, for lack of a better term, conditioned or programmed at a really young age, between the ages of 0 to 7. Our conscious mind was not formed yet until about 7 to 8 years old. So we're just living with our subconscious mind at that time, and it's acting like a sponge, taking everything in. And so what happens with these events and experiences that happen in our life, we attach meaning to everything. And then that meaning stays with us when additional events and experiences come up in life. So for example, if anybody has ever had the thought of, I don't know, maybe you're in business and something happens where somebody doesn't sign on to work with you, and you automatically make it mean, oh, they don't like me, right? Like that's something that was installed at a really young age because of an event or experience, just to give you an example of what that can sound like. And so the subconscious mind is taking everything in. And so what ultimately happens, come 7, 8 years old, your conscious mind is formed, and there's almost like a hypothetical, like, trap door that's kind of closed on the subconscious mind. And now it hosts all of your beliefs. Not all negative, by the way. They're not all limiting. They're not all negative. We have a mix of both positive and negative, right? A lot of times we can like dwell on the negative, but we have a mix of both. So it's almost like it looks like a bunch of like plus signs and minus signs in the brain. And so in order to get to a limiting belief that like no longer serves us, you have to create like what I like to call like gaps in that critical faculty, that like trap door of the subconscious mind, because we can read all the books, we can like listen to all the podcasts and like take away these tips and these tricks and these action steps, but they're more so with the conscious mind. And so like if someone has a goal, I know we were talking even about myself, I'll always use myself as an example. If I have a goal, like, yeah, I want to save more. I'm like, yes, I'm going to do it. But somewhere in my subconscious, there's a limiting belief that's actually not going to allow me to save more. It's going to go in my mind and pop back out because I don't have a limiting belief that supports it. And so the work that I do creates these like gaps in that critical faculty, so you can go in and change a belief that no longer is serving you to a more positive one. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that besides just hypnotherapy.
Okay. And where do you see this? What are some of these beliefs that need to be rewired when you have to get into this trap door? If you're working with an entrepreneur, what are some of the more common ones? I'm sure everybody's a little unique, but are there themes that you typically see most often?
100%. So the reason someone would come to me, or the problem people come to me with, is never the real problem. It's always a symptom or a behavior of the real problem. And the real
Jen,
problem
that sounds
is typically,
I'm sure, not to jump in, Julie, but when somebody comes to me with a financial problem, I'm curious what you think about this, Jen, as well. It's typically not, I don't have enough money, typically isn't the real problem, right? Do you see that in your practice as well, Jen, that what presents is not really what's going on behind the scenes?
Oh, absolutely. I think like overspending's like a big one, right? Like there's usually like a deeper reason why like they're overspending, or like they're trying to fill something that's missing, right? It's not just like, oh, I just have more expenses and life is happening. It's like they're being triggered by something deeper.
So I'm sorry, I saw that example and that overlap, and I wanted to comment. So your clients come to you with an issue, and that's typically not at surface level what's going on. It's something else.
Never the real issue. Yeah, it's always a behavior or symptom of the real thing. And the real limiting belief, there's common themes. The most popular ones that are amongst a lot of us are, I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving, like I'm not lovable, I'm not smart enough. Like those are typically like the core things that drive the way in which we behave.
So I don't deserve this trip.
Or I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Huge too.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So somebody would come in with that belief, and you would start to work with them in a capacity to help them unwind. What would you typically start to do with that particular client?
Yeah. So typically, like what I'll do, because I have two today, is the first session with a client, the way in which I work is, I like to just call it like therapeutic questioning. Like there's no modality like hypnotherapy happening. It's a lot of questions both to the conscious mind that makes sense logically when I ask, but then questions that don't necessarily make sense and it kind of make you like think a little bit like what? Like questions to the subconscious mind because I'm trying to get in a little bit more. And in that session, we unpack what that core limiting belief is, along with like a lot of emotionally charged like emotions like anger and fear and hurt that are attached with it that we can then utilize the change work that I do in future sessions to help them.
Interesting. I was just meeting with a client before we jumped on to record this. And when I look at this particular client's financial situation, objectively, they're in a very sound financial position. But there's the one spouse is an entrepreneur and their income is very seasonal. So it comes in spurts, and sometimes they're not taking a paycheck to kind of support the business. So there's always this fear of having enough. And I was just having this conversation where I'm trying to help her understand that on paper, the numbers would support you taking a vacation every once in a while, right? And giving yourself and your family that gift. So what would you guess, or what would you think is happening? Is that something that you would typically see in your practice? These folks that can't objectively, understand their financial situation. And Jen, do you see some of that as well in your practice?
I think, yeah, I see that all the time. And I think that's where you have to kind of use a little bit of that like hypnotic language to like talk them through and calm their nervous system down a little bit too, to start like understanding why, or understanding what the fear is behind taking the vacation or spending the money. Right. And then I think the crossover with like someone who's like consciously and objectively seeing the situation like you or her husband, right? Like can start to bring in those kind of conversations like, okay, so if this happens, then we can do this, right? And then it starts to calm those subconscious like beliefs that are coming up around why or why not she feels like she can spend or can't spend, right? Or take a vacation, or, even it might even just be like she doesn't want to take a vacation because she feels like she's not contributing to the family anymore, or things like that. Like I feel like there's a lot of conversations around that too.
It's interesting. So as I'm hearing you talk about your work, Julie and Jen, I'm sure you see similar things in your practice. It's just always interesting to talk to folks who are, again, objectively in one position, but are saying and expressing things that don't align with what I'm seeing as a financial planner in my case. And trying to find ways to kind of help these people through that, I think is really interesting about the work that you do, Julie.
Yeah. And I can share more about that too. Like when so when people come to situations like that, like they're coming with their own model of the world. So like this person in the situation, again, like based on their events and experiences that happened in their life and the way they filter through a lot of things, they're left with their model of the world. And that's how they're approaching the situation. And your model of the world is going to be very, very different. So even though they're like hearing that from you, they're still running based on their model of the world. And it's going to be really hard for them to listen to that. And they're going to continue thinking and behaving that same way. And so with a lot of the work that we do, and what Jen even mentioned with like hypnotic language and some of the questions that we ask, it's really to start like loosening up their model of the world to see different potential solutions and possibilities. And a lot of times that can't be done just through regular questions that are being asked. It has to be more directed to the subconscious mind. I like to say, because they're like in a box. They're really in a box. So to ask the questions, it kind of like pops them out of their box for a little bit.
And what are those more focused questions? So I think as a practitioner, it can be different, right? So am I putting you on the spot? Is that an unfair question? Yeah. Okay.
It's going to be different on the situation because there are like we like to call like advanced presuppositions in NLP. So based on what someone's sharing would then determine how you would respond.
Got you. But it's about understanding how they built that framework, how they created that box that they're in based on their childhood experience, right? So understanding who they are, where they came from, created this box. And then you have a line of questioning and a series of questioning to help kind of get them open and outside of the box. Right.
Yeah. And it's just to loosen it a little, right? It's like that's where you need to start, is just loosening the grip that they have on the current situation. So they can see some new possibilities. Like that's where it starts.
Yeah.
That's always where
So
it
that's
starts.
kind of an underspending example. Somebody who has financial capacity but won't spend because of whatever reason, right? And everybody's going to be wildly different in that regard. Jen, can you
Yes.
think of any other examples? Overspending is probably a big one where people are being compulsive, and Julie, you're raising your hand. So
I'm an example right now.
right. So overspending, is that another area where you find that people have these mindsets about money that are negative, that they need to kind of address their subconscious? Is that a good one to maybe tackle here?
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing from that is like, that's the action that's coming from a thought or belief again. So it's kind of like backtracking and being like, all right, well, you're overspending, but what's the thought or belief that's coming up before you overspend, right? Like, I deserve this, or I'm not good at saving anyways. So like, why not? Right. Or that,
I can share mine too, because I'm a perfect example. And I haven't like dove into this more, and I'm absolutely going to explore it, because like that's the beauty. Like I can like make my own hypnosis for myself. But I know for me, like what's been popping up, because like what's better than a real life example is well, I'm going to spend it now because I don't know if I'll have the money to invest in this or buy this later. So like it's definitely coming from like a scarcity point of like, well, I'm going to buy the thing now, or I'm going to invest in the thing now, or I'm going to do it now because I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it later. I don't know if I'll have like another chance type of thing.
And where do you think that comes from?
It's a great question. Again, I haven't explored it. And like, I try to think back like my childhood, and I'm like, I don't know if that, I know like my dad had a hard time growing up, and it could potentially be from that. It's not from my mom's side, but I personally don't remember an experience consciously in which it would have developed from that. So I think it's just like somewhere really ingrained subconsciously that I've not unpacked.
Okay. Interesting. So how do you walk people through? Do you go through a timeline where you're just kind of trying to get some history? How do you go back and explore somebody's childhood, right? Because it seems like a lot of this literally comes from adolescence and childhood, right? That these things start to get ingrained in ourselves. What does that typically look like when you're working with a client?
Yeah.
And that question, I guess, is for both of you, Julie, in your work, and Jen, if you get into that with your financial coaching clients.
Yeah, I can share in my first session, like we obviously, take some time to build rapport, although it's pretty much established because I would have met with them or have chatted with them before, but take some time to build rapport. And then I really share with them, like in that first session, I'm going to be, asking a lot of questions. You're going to be doing a lot of talking. Probably the one session you'll do the majority of it. And the questions in which I'm asking and you're sharing, it's really helping to create the roadmap for us to move forward. Because I really believe in a release and then reprogram type of flow and format, because we got a lot of stuff, program condition, we need to release before we can reprogram. And so there are a bunch of questions I'll ask, but then there's one question I'll get to, and I'll just say, hey, we're going to go back to the beginning of time. I'm going to have you just start to like list off. You can popcorn, doesn't have to be chronological. I want you to just bullet point for me any significant negative event that happened in your life. How old you were, quick bullet point what happened. I don't need the story. And then what emotion you were feeling or was associated with it. And from there, it's kind of, they start off slow majority of the time. And then it's like a popcorn. And what's happening in that moment as they share like the emotions, especially, I'm gathering the emotions. And then the next modality we do in a next session, we're releasing the emotional charge behind those. Because let's say when it comes to finances, if there's a fear when it comes to money, what we do with the emotion of fear is we do a modality to dissolve the emotional charge behind it. So you can meet fear with a neutral energy. And that in turn, like when you meet fear in the future, because you will, we're human. It's not to say you're never going to feel it again. But when you meet it in the future, you meet it with a neutral energy, and then you in turn take different actions towards the very thing that you were doing before. So with that simple question of like, we're going to go back to the beginning of time, just want you to highlight, bullet point any significant negative event. Like I literally get their whole timeline.
Yeah.
within that
Yeah. And
question.
Jen, how about you? How do you explore somebody's past financially? Do you take them through, a timeline looking for bullet points, or how do you explore some of those things?
I do have the same kind of question, like a questionnaire in the beginning to just kind of have them like open up and share a little bit more about their past and their history. I tend to like kind of hybrid work the like subconscious reprogramming into like the conversations around money. So I think sometimes people aren't aware that I'm like listening for specific words or phrases or things they're using, right? And then kind of inserting questions at that time, right? Like I don't know that everyone always wants to feel like they're being interrogated about their financial like history and
I've
past.
heard it. I've heard it described as a righteous trick by somebody in the industry I saw speaking at a conference that was kind of touching on some of this stuff. And it's like clients are coming to you for financial coaching. They're not maybe at the surface or up front, like aware that they're going to get a little hypnotherapy or work done. So you're kind of just slipping that in. But it's a righteous, right? You are ultimately going to help them out by doing so.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of clients like know that I have the certifications for hypnotherapy, and I work like have that in my background, and some of them love it. They're like, when are you going to send me a hypnosis, or like when are we going to do more of it? And then there's the clients that like understand it, but you do kind of need to like ease into it. And I think one of the biggest phrases I hear all the time, and Julie, I stole the like question from you, but it's just, I'm bad with money. I've always been bad with money. My parents have been bad with money. And I think the easiest question to kind of insert there is like, when did you decide that? And what makes that true? Right. So like kind of figuring out if it's more of like truth that they're like really bad with money, or it's just a feeling and a thought that they've come up with over time.
Right.
What they don't understand is happening too is like the more we're repeating certain things, like I'm just bad with money, I'm just bad with money. Well, yeah, you're continuing to feed that belief into your subconscious. Therefore, your behaviors are always going to reflect that. Always.
Right.
And so if it's something that we want to change, yeah, it's like, then you would ask too, it's like, okay, what's a more empowering belief that you can adopt, like even just for today? And like staying in that belief. Because a lot of times, not just clients, like friends, family members, we all focus on the things we don't want or don't want to be doing versus the things we want or want to be doing. And that right there is like a huge shift for a lot of people when you can start doing that instead.
Yeah. And I think that I'm bad with money is probably the best example. I hear that all the time as well. So there's a million reasons why somebody could show up in adulthood and have that belief about themselves and start to identify with it, right? So as you both described, trying to get back into their history a little bit to identify maybe where some of these emotions have come from. Regardless of the reason, we show up with this limiting belief and this identity or mindset that I'm bad with money. And then again, what I was saying before, why I think the work that both of you do is so impactful is because we all know we should have a budget. We all know that we should save and invest for our future, right? We know intuitively the things that we should be doing with our money. And then we hear from other professionals across industries about having an improved mindset or changing our beliefs. But I've found that extremely difficult to do, right? Without consistent practice over a long period of time, right? So that's where that
hit the nail on the head too with the consistent piece you mentioned. Like that is it. It is consistency. Like that your subconscious needs, thrives, wants that repetition. So It's not like it's never a one and done thing. It's always like the consistency piece, which is going to be huge.
Yeah, you're not going to meditate, sit on a pillow once and then be enlightened, right? I mean, it's just not. I wish that were the case for all of us.
I wish that were the case.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more in practice, Julie, or both of you guys, how you apply this in practical terms. So when we hear the term hypnosis, some people may think of the, magician with the clock back and forth in front of your face. So these terms might be worth kind of diving into when we talk about hypnosis or NLP or EFT. These are some of the tools in your toolbox. Can you kind of walk us through what these things are and how you apply them?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do that too, one thing with like when Jen was sharing about clients too, know that, because it's like, yeah, we can weave in that conversational language, and that's like easy, right? That's like really us supporting our clients to get to where they want to be. But when it does come to things like hypnosis and EFT, there's consent there, right? It's like, because I think a lot of times the myth is that hypnosis or something of the like is mind control. And it's actually very far from the truth of what it is. So that's why I wanted to just state that. So obviously when Jen's working with clients, there's consent that there's going to be a hypnosis session, right? Like the client needs to agree that I want to do this.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. And just to go a little bit further, when I mentioned righteous trick, it was really along the line of really specific interview questions, right? Yes. Where we're trying to get at a specific, not elicit a specific answer, but we're trying to go down a particular path to have a conversation, not to mind control somebody into, better financial behavior. Right.
Yeah, that's the biggest myth. And what I'll share is it's, when it comes to hypnosis, the easy way to explain it is it's really a relaxed state. The goal is, when we think about going throughout our day, like our brain is going nonstop, right? Thinking of all the things we have to do, like what's on our plate. And so the goal with hypnosis, so that's when we're going throughout the day, we're in our conscious mind, like all those brain waves going, we're in our conscious mind. In order to get into the subconscious, again, that's where those beliefs lie, right? You got to create those gaps in that trapdoor to get in there. You got to slow your brain waves down. We got to slow our brainwaves down. And so to do that, we have to enter into a relaxed state. And so hypnosis is really the act of getting into a really deep, relaxed state in which it can feel like a light meditation or a deep meditation. It can feel like you're going to sleep, but that's all it is at the end of the day, is getting to a relaxed state so we can slow the brainwaves down to get into the subconscious, because you cannot get into the subconscious when your brain is like all over the place throughout the day. And you're fully in control. There's no mind control. There's nobody like taking over anything. Typically what would happen in a hypnosis session, and I know Jen can speak for herself and her clients, I'm asking specific questions to my client about what it is they desire, how they want to feel, like what do they see, what do they hear, what do they feel, like who's there with you, like what are the benefits, what are the results of this happening? And then when we've slowed down their brain waves in what we call an induction in hypnosis, that's just getting the brain waves to slow down, then we really deliver back exactly it is what they want. So there's no like me making things up. It's always like a co-collaborative process with the client where I'm just now repeating things back to them. Because if I were to repeat it back to them, in their conscious mind, the conscious mind is quick to reject things, right? Like ego comes up like, yeah, no, we can't do that. Yeah, we can't achieve that. And the subconscious mind will easily more accept it. So it's really a co-collaborative process. So you're just in a simply relaxed state and you just get to hear everything, take it in through your subconscious.
And what does that look like, Jen, in your work when you're working with a financial coaching client? What does hypnosis typically look like? What are you helping them relax and get into that subconscious mind about?
Yeah. So most of my hypnosis that I'm doing for clients, we're having those conversations online and I'm kind of getting to know them a little bit more. And then I usually create the hypnosis recording offline. So it's something that they have in their toolbox on their phone, like they can download it and they can listen to it at night when they're going to sleep. And it really is that like repetition that Julie mentioned of like creating consistency, because it's not just going to be like, hey, you're going to listen to this hypnosis one time and then poof, magic. You're finally going to believe you're great with money. You're going to stop overspending. And all of a sudden you're going to have, a ton of savings in the bank, right? Like it's continuing to build up that almost like confidence of your subconscious to then be able to, have those beliefs and thoughts that are feeling really true and really relevant to your life in that moment.
So that's a great point to highlight. So it could be in person, it could be over Zoom where you're going through this hypnosis, or it could be a recording. So you're literally have it it's accessible, you have it at your fingertips, and you can literally be in a client's ear supporting them whenever they want that. How often, what is a good routine for something like this? For somebody who's trying to change mindset in the subconscious, what, Is it every day? Is it multiple times a day? Once a week? Where are we at?
I can share. And I like to come from a very realistic point of view because I don't like to overwhelm people. I always share with my clients, like I'll give them the copy of their hypnosis recording. And I do that because, again, it's that repetition piece. It's not going to be a one and done. I always say if you can listen to it 2 to 3 times a week, we're great. I don't want to say every day because I sometimes think that sets people up for failure if they automatically are like, oh my God, I missed one day. And then I don't want them to miss one day. And then that, snowballs into another day. So I like to say like 2 to 3 times a week. And some people will, it's determining like best time of day to listen. But I find a lot of my clients and community love to listen like right before they go to bed. And that's actually first thing in the morning and right before you go to sleep. That's actually like the best times of day to reprogram your subconscious because your brain waves are more slowed down already.
I had a really intelligent question and I lost it.
Well, I was going to share something though, based off what Jen said. What I love how Jen combines the work because it's like in the sessions with clients, they're focusing on that like tactical next action steps for whatever they're working towards financially, right? Like I love that. And then she comes in with the subconscious piece that they can listen to that on their own time. Like I personally think it's a game changer, like knowing this work, because I know like the action steps paired with that subconscious work that is going to like really propel clients forward.
Right. That's a good segue. So you guys know each other and work together. So from my understanding, Julie taught Jen some of this stuff, and then Jen became Julie's financial coach in some capacity, right? Is that fair description of how you guys have known each other?
Yeah, it was kind of a cool integration of, I started working with Julie because I was like in that space of like, hey, there's some things in life, in business, nutrition, career, finances, all these things, right? Where like, I know what I want to do, but there's like something holding me back. And I worked with a lot of business coaches, a lot of like coaches just in all different categories of life. And I was like, why is none of it sticking? And I think sometimes that's kind of like when I work with clients too, you're like, I have this coach, but why am I not showing up to the meeting? Or why do I keep canceling it? Or why am I stressed or anxious when I jump on a call with Jim, right? Like, you're like, these people are here to help me, but there's a lot of resistance there, right? And I think when I met Julie and she's like, hey, like your subconscious is controlling a lot of those feelings and beliefs. I was like, all right, I need to like figure out how to not only potentially just do this for my own personal development, but then how do I bring it into my practice as well? Because I know that's so true for everybody when it comes to finances and money and just enjoying and feeling confident around building wealth. Like, I think that is also like very hard for a lot of people to believe that they can be wealthy and believe that they can be successful with their finances. So I joined her anchored program and it was probably the best decision I've ever made.
Well, not only, I'd imagine, obviously there's some of that mindset is going to come from your childhood, as we know, and Julie's described, but just your early career journey, it sounded as I've gotten to know you, that you were in a lot of places that were telling you that you couldn't do things the way that you wanted to, right? The institutions that you worked for were kind of limiting in the type of work they'd allow you to do and how you were able to engage with clients. So I'd imagine it's not surprising to, be at a place where it's like, there's that resistance to starting your own business and, and then coaching other people about wealth. So it's cool that you found Julie and started to work on that yourself and now apply it to your coaching practice and the clients you work with is super cool. And Julie is one of those clients.
And then I became a client of hers because we were working together one-on-one. So I obviously got to know more about her business and I was like, wait, I need this. And so I've been working with Jen and I've been a client of hers and still am.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
so kind of the master becomes or the student becomes the master, right? And vice versa, which is super cool. Yeah. So would you mind a demonstration? Do you think that would work in this format? What would either something you guys have worked on or another example of what this looks like in practice? What does the hypnosis sound like and what are you trying to focus on? Can you give us a working example of this?
Yeah. So in chatting about this, we were thinking, because one thing either myself or Jen can do is offer your listeners a hypnosis audio and like link it to the show notes based on a certain topic. We can take that offline and decide what feels best. But we can demo a subconscious reprogramming modality that we would typically do with a client a lot of times before I even get to hypnosis, because usually I'll do like 6 sessions with a client. We don't even get to hypnosis until like the third or fourth session, because there's some things that need to happen beforehand. But there's one modality we could do. I think that would be maybe better for listeners to hear, because they can listen to a hypnosis like on their own time. Yeah. And with that being said, this would not be like a hypothetical situation. I know I shared with you before, anything we do always has to be a real life example because we're working with someone's subconscious. So I believe, Jen, we landed on, we wanted to do demo swish pattern. Is that accurate?
And what is swish pattern?
Yeah. So I'll share. So swish pattern, it's an NLP, so neuro-linguistic, aka subconscious reprogramming modality that's useful in creating momentum towards a compelling future. It helps take an unwanted state or behavior that a client no longer wants to feel or do and replaces it with a new state or behavior that they want to have slash do.
Yeah. A real quick question. So hypnosis, is that an overarching term? And then within that, there are things like NLP, which are
the opposite, actually.
With the opposite. Okay.
Yeah. So let's say if you have an umbrella, there's like subconscious reprogramming and NLP. And NLP is really how you communicate with the subconscious mind. It's like the language of the subconscious mind. And then the way in which you work with people doing the subconscious reprogramming could be through tapping, through EFT, could be through breath work. I'm also certified in like hypno breath work, hypnotherapy, visualization. There's a lot of other modalities. And within NLP itself, there are a lot of subconscious reprogramming modalities. And so this would be one that we would be doing. Yeah.
Cool.
It's a good question.
Appreciate it.
I think it's also just important. I mean, Jim, you and I like deal with money all day long, right? And I think this why is true is when we picked this modality and even just like these conversations of like the feelings and beliefs and state that I'm still working on it every day, right? Like there are always things that are going to come up potentially where you're like, oh, we're going on vacation or trying to take time off from work, or, maybe it's maternity leave or switching jobs or taking a pay cut or even getting a big bonus. And there's so many different events that like trigger different feelings. And you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was going to make me nervous, anxious, feel shame, guilt, or anything like that. So it's like this constant working process of just like being aware of the fact that like it's not always going to be perfect and it's not going to just like magically switch everything either.
That's a great point, Jen. And I would second that. As a financial planner, even in my own life, there are things, it feels like daily, that come up that trigger some kind of emotion, right? And these beliefs come back to the forefront, even though I've worked on it for years and continue to do that. And I think, again, what's interesting about this and why I'm so into it is because we're busy. All of our lives that we live right now can be pretty overwhelming, whether it's career and family or social media or content, the news, whatever it is, right? We're being bombarded with input all the time. And if we don't address some of these subconscious emotions and we just let the subconscious kind of take over and make decisions for us, it could be really detrimental, right? So figuring out tools to kind of create the space to do this work and make it part of your ongoing routine. Again, it's not something you're just going to be able to snap your fingers or listen to this podcast episode and like all of a sudden have a different mindset, but trying to get people to incorporate this into their routine and have it as one of their tools that they can deal with the things that come up, I think is really, really cool. So that's a great point. Yeah.
I can share too a couple of tips after for people to like just get started on their own, because this is work you can do on your own. Like I'm a hypnotherapist and I'll say you don't need to work with me one-on-one. Like we can share tips on like how to get started on your own. And what I also love about this work, and I'm so glad you touched on this, Jen, is it's not going to be like you do something one time and again, all of a sudden everything's changed for you. It's the more you do it and the more consistent. It's like these small, subtle shifts add up to really big shifts in your life. And the biggest piece that I find with all of my clients is it allows, and I'm going to utilize myself as an example. I've had a full-time job for 6 years while building my business. I just got laid off in August. And I also got fired, was it 7-ish years ago? It probably took me 2 years to fully get over the being fired. Whereas this layoff probably took me 2 weeks. And that's the beauty of this work is like, it's not saying you're not going to have those thoughts pop up or you're not going to experience those feelings, but the length of time you stay in them is a lot shorter and you can move through it a lot quicker.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of
I
it.
think a lot of the work that we do is about expediting the process, right? And learning the tools and the tricks so it doesn't take 2 years, right? It may take 2 months, might take 2 weeks, right? But it's better than 2 years or whatever the timeline is. So that's all great stuff. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So swish pattern. What are we doing? What are we looking at here?
Okay. So Jen and we are going to do, and it shouldn't take longer than 5 minutes. It's pretty quick, which is great. So Jen, just want to be sure I wrote down before, but I'm going to ask you again. But before we get started, is it all right with your unconscious mind for you to make this change today and for you to be aware of it consciously? Always going to get the conscious, unconscious permission. Great. So when it comes to an unwanted state or behavior that you'd like to replace today with a new state or behavior, what would that unwanted state or behavior be?
A state of nervousness around spending money.
Beautiful. State of nervousness about spending money. And when you think of this nervousness state about spending money, do you have a picture in mind of what that looks like for you?
Yes.
Great. Just open your eyes, just clear that screen of that picture, kind of just like wipe it. And now, how would you like to feel and act instead? What kind of person do you desire to be?
Yeah. A person who feels calm and at ease, relaxed, and excited around spending money.
I love that.
That I have.
That you have. I love that. When you think of this new desired state, do you have a picture in mind of what this looks like?
Yes.
Good. I'm going to keep your eyes closed for here. And keeping this picture in your mind, I want you to ensure you're stepping into your body. So you're looking through your own eyes, seeing this picture. So looking at this picture through your own eyes, and we're going to adjust some components of this picture to ensure you have the most positive feelings. So you can almost imagine there's like maybe a couple of dials on the side of the picture. And let's say there's one for brightness. If you were to turn that dial up, so that picture gets brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter, does that make you want this picture more or less?
More.
Great. I want you to keep turning it up so it gets brighter and brighter until you're at the most positive feeling for that picture right now. And then let's say there's another dial. Maybe there's a dial that makes this picture like bigger and bigger and larger than life in front of you. If you were to turn that up, would that make you want it more or less?
Less.
Good. So I'm going to have you keep that where it is. You adjust it for the most positive feelings. And then if you find that there's another dial of some sort that would make you want to adjust this picture to have the most positive feelings for you, I'm going to have you adjust until you get to the most positive feelings. And then when you do so, I'm going to have you step out of the picture. So you're no longer looking through your own eyes, but you're seeing yourself in the picture now. And then when you're ready, I'm going to have you open your eyes and come back to the room. Did you have lunch today yet?
No. 11 o'clock.
11 a.m. Good. Clear the screen. Great. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to bring up that old picture, right? That old picture, that old state. You can have your eyes closed if you want. You're going to bring up that old picture, bring up that old state. And I want you to step into that picture so you're fully associated, looking through your own eyes, make it fill the screen. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that new picture and kind of put it in like the lower left-hand corner, a little small, a little dark, just for now. And then when I say swish, I'm going to have you bring up the picture of the new state, and you're going to make it explode big and bright on the screen while that old picture rapidly shrinks to a distant point and disappears. And this can happen as quickly as 1, 2, 3, swish. Are you ready?
Yep.
Good. 1, 2, 3, swish. Open your eyes. Close your eyes. Bring up that old state on the screen. Bring in the new state in the lower left-hand corner. 1, 2, 3, swish. Explode that new state big and bright on the screen. Big and bright, big and bright. Old state, old behavior disappears in the future. Open your eyes. Close your eyes. Bring up that old state in front of you. Bring up the new state in the lower left-hand corner. 1, 2, 3, swish. Explode that big state. That big state, new state, big and bright on the screen right in front of you. Old state disappears, disappears, disappears. Open your eyes. Close your eyes. Bring up the old state, new state, lower left-hand corner. 1, 2, 3, swish. Explode that new state big and bright on the screen while the old state disappears into a distance. Disappears, disappears. Open your eyes. Close your eyes. Bring up the old state, new state, lower left-hand corner. 1, 2, 3, swish. Explode that new state big and bright on the screen while that old state just disappears. Open your eyes. Close your eyes. I'm just taking the breath in here. Breath out. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the space that we're in. And now, Jen, how do you feel about that old state, old behavior, and how is it different now?
Kind of feels insignificant.
Beautiful. And if you were to go out into the future, which if it would have happened in that past, that old state or behavior, you would have had that old state, that old behavior, that nervousness about spending. What happens instead now?
I get excited to make the plan.
Beautiful.
Excited to, yeah.
I feel better having listened to it and not gone through the exercise. I felt calm while it was happening.
I love it.
So real quick, so thank you for both of you guys for sharing that example. Just real quick, it sounds like you're creating images in the mind, getting rid of the old negative limiting beliefs, kind of create an image and kind of going through a process of making that new image, that new belief. Is that what's happening there? More prominent?
Yeah, subconscious mind loves, communicates, receives, processes information and images. And so like that's the importance of bringing up the image of the two. And what you'll typically see with clients a lot of time is they kind of get like confused or they just keep getting really excited about the new image, but you do it a bunch of times and you do it pretty quickly towards the end. So that old state is really just disappearing and you're left with the new state.
Yeah,
so replaces it.
Jen, one of the things I wanted to ask you a quick question on. One of the things you mentioned during that demonstration is that you wanted to feel excited about spending the money. And then you were quick to jump in and say that I have. And this is the interesting overlap between the mindset and the beliefs and the practical, right? So this is not talk yourself into spending money that you don't have, right? Or whatever the negative financial behavior is, right? You have to kind of couple this with good old fashioned financial planning and doing the work to have the resources, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the piece like coupled sometimes with like the financial piece that's beneficial for clients. And Julie, maybe you can jump in here too, but I think sometimes it's like, we can have these affirmations of like, I'm making millions. I have to spend money to make money, right? Like all these positive things. But sometimes if you don't have the boundaries of the tactical and practical things paired with it, it can easily get out of control.
I 100% agree. I think it's always subconscious and strategy. That's my jam. And that's, I think, is the formula for success. Yeah, affirmations are great. And like, I can't just be in a bathtub saying affirmations and all of a sudden $1 million are in my bank account. Like, there needs to be actions taken on my part, that I am not spending as much. I am watching certain things. I'm making smart investments. Like, the two need to be paired together. It's literally like a power combo.
Right. I'm glad that came up.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for the demonstration. Really appreciate it. Is there anything else related to hypnosis, NLP? Is there anything else worth, highlighting for folks before we kind of wind down here?
Yeah, tips. Because I know I was going to quick tips, because anybody can start doing subconscious reprogramming on their own. The biggest thing I would first get clear on, if there's an area of your life or goal, get really specific, positively stated, what do you want? Because the majority of the time, here's a perfect example. If someone's like, well, I don't want to be broke. Well, great. That's not positively stated. And fun fact, your subconscious mind doesn't process negative. So it's really hearing, I want to be broke. If someone were to say, I don't want to be broke, great. What do you want to be instead? How do you want to feel instead? So positively stated, get clear on what you want and get specific. So like, I have money in savings. Great. How much money? Get clear on what you want and then get specific. Those two things alone will really help you, because a lot of times we're not doing that. So I think that's like a perfect first start. And then if there are then I'll share two more things. If there are certain phrases you catch yourself saying, like, I can't be successful. Sometimes I'm bad at money. Let's use that one. That's such a good one. I'm bad at money. I like to do something called a switch task with clients. So anytime you catch yourself or hear yourself saying I'm bad with money, say it, but then automatically say switch and replace it with something more positive. Right? Like,
you literally voice the switch.
Yeah. Yep. Like, you can say it out loud or in your head. It doesn't matter which, but one that you can get behind. So let's say it's, okay, I'm bad at money. Switch. I'm giving myself grace to be good with money. Like, I know I can be good at money. I'm learning to be good with money. I'm learning to be better with money. So anytime you hear yourself saying something negative, switch, replace it with something else. Because what you're doing is you're bringing that like subconscious thought more into your conscious, and then you're switching it. And the more times you do it, you're going to put it back into your subconscious as that new belief. So like that, you can immediately start doing. And then the last thing I would say is visualization. It's, again, creating that image in your mind. The subconscious loves that visual imagery. So when you get clear on that thing you want and you get specific, now maybe take like 2 minutes in the morning when you first wake up or right before you go to sleep, because your brain waves are shut down or they're slowed down. Paint that picture in your mind. When you have it, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Who's there with you? What's happening? Just give yourself like 2 minutes to paint it. And why that's important is subconscious mind loves imagery, but it also doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So why not put the images in your mind of the things that you want? And that's going to help you start reprogramming for success. Those are like always my tips for people to start with.
That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that, Julie. Jen, any tips from our favorite financial coach related to any of this? How do people kind of get started changing their financial mindset?
I think the biggest thing when you're talking about subconscious is the consistency and the habit building. So building in time where you're like, hey, I know that on Friday mornings, I have to look at my budget, or I know that I have to go into my savings account and transfer money, or things like that. Like, I think those are helpful. And those are building subconscious beliefs, right? Of like, I'm taking care of my money. Like, it's easy. It's exciting, right? Like, even kind of thinking about like having a meeting with your financial advisor or your financial coach, right? Like, those can be stressful situations. So like getting yourself into a relaxed state, going to get a coffee, which is like maybe that's exciting or fun, right? It gives you joy, and then you can show up to your meeting. I think those are like simple things that will help the process overall, so that maybe handling or dealing with financial conversations or topics don't feel as daunting.
Yeah,
I'm secretly laughing because I just looked at my calendar because I'm meeting with Jen this week for myself. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did strategically schedule that meeting at that time.
Need to get the coffee or something else to put yourself in a relaxed state for your meeting with
I
your
think I'm
financial
going to
coach.
be in like a breath work session before. And I was like, that's beautiful. It's perfect.
That's cool. A couple quick questions in terms of well-being, right? Getting into a good, positive mindset or relaxed state. Are there things that you guys do besides hypnotherapy and breath work that you feel improve your overall well-being? Habits, rituals, routines that you kind of get back to that make you feel good, that kind of create the space to tackle some of these things that we talked about today?
Yeah. In addition to what you shared, besides hypnosis and breathwork, walking. And I'm going to add a caveat to that. Walking, because it shifts your state. Because if you're in a state of, I don't like more of a negative state, it's going to help shift your state. But my caveat to that is without listening to anything. No music, no podcast, content free.
That's interesting. I think I'm a victim of that, or my own self-sabotage. I'll often get up from my desk and go take a walk, but I feel like I constantly have these headphones in my ears and I am constantly consuming something. So that's a really good point, I think, that you add to the walk. That's great.
Well, it allows you to like listen to yourself a little bit more.
Just see what comes up. Interesting.
I recently took myself out to dinner by myself. I was on a vacation with friends and I was third wheeling and they went off and did something. And it was very hard to put away I put away my phone and it was so hard to leave it there and be like, okay, it's okay to be here by myself. But you do realize how quickly the thoughts can come in and how distracted we are on a daily basis because of the consumption and the constant ads and feeds, and you bring up Instagram and then you scroll and then you're not actually taking the time to understand what's coming up or the thoughts and beliefs that are entering your mind.
Yeah, I feel that all the time. And I think the clients that I work with are in that space where everybody's kind of busy and just consuming. There's so much input and incoming email, text. My son is homesick from school today. And I realized this morning that I had to download a different app to assign him a stay home from school day. And it was just one more thing that I had to kind of go through. And I think we're all going through similar stuff. And it's no wonder that with everything going on, you get to a point where you're supposed to make a financial decision and your subconscious brain just fires, right? And makes potentially the wrong decision, or you start feeling stressed about your finances because there's just no space, right? So I think that's great advice for all of us to take ourselves for a content-free walk or a content-free dinner by ourselves. We just sit quietly and enjoy a meal. I think those are both great recommendations. Last quick question. Are there any books or podcasts related to what we talked about today or otherwise that you guys think are interesting, useful, inspiring? Julie, specifically to you, anything on hypnosis, or if somebody wanted to explore NLP or EFT or mindset in general, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm looking up at my shelf. For hypnosis, it's more so if you want to learn, but it's a really good understanding. Learn Hypnosis Now by Michael Stevenson is probably one of my favorites. And then How to Unleash the Power of Your Subconscious Mind. That's a good one. I'll leave it at those two. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at those two. Those are two good ones I'd recommend.
Awesome. Thank you. Jen, anything from you that was particularly useful or helpful? Anything you're listening to right now?
Yeah, I actually might plug Julie's Activate. She has a digital library that has a bunch of just really great overall hypnosis to some of them are just meditation and getting peaceful and calm. Some of them are money related. I think there's a sleep one, right? I think they're just there's some really great resources on that portal and in that digital library.
Cool. That's a great segue. So where do people find you? So where is this digital portal, Julie, and where do people check out your work?
Yeah, so I can share the link with you, and then On Instagram, if people like I always say my door's always open for communication and conversations. Julie.m.costa on Instagram. And then in my link, there's like everything you can access there. And then my website is juliemcosta. Yeah, juliemcosta.com. But the link I'll share with you, if anybody does want to try Activate, I like it because it's just like on-demand subconscious reprogramming. There's like 80 audios at this point. I can share a 7-day free trial, that link with you. So I'm just gonna make a note to myself for that.
Perfect. So we'll link that in the show notes and spotlight that on the blog post when we put this out to for people who are interested to check it out and actually get their hands on some of this stuff. So that's great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and there's the whole abundance and money category. So there's a lot of money stuff.
Perfect. We'll spotlight those specifically. And Jen, what about you? Where do people check you out?
On Instagram and socials, I'm Finances with Jen, and baseplanning.co is my website that has all the resources to get in touch with me too.
Love it. Thank you guys for your time and your expertise. I appreciate it. Again, I think, as I scroll through Instagram and LinkedIn, there's just so much changing your mindset and, changing your beliefs. And we all know we should be doing this, but there's very little practical tools and resources and frameworks out there, which is why, again, I think the work that both of you do can be really, really helpful to a lot of people. So I encourage everybody to check both of your websites out, check out the link to Julie's website and that digital portal with some of the hypnosis downloads that you can find there. And thanks again for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See you. Till next time.